All right, the Rogue Asset Podcast. Today, we're welcoming Ms. Paula K. Watts, who is the CEO and founder of Government Procurement Innovators. GPS provides business coaching to startups and existing small businesses who are navigating the federal acquisition process. Ms. Watts leverages her experiences as a small business owner and previous 8A government contractor to lead GPI staff members in coaching and training small businesses. Ms. Watts' expertise has successfully guided several 8A firms in obtaining multi-million-dollar contracts. As an expert on the procurement and management of government contracts, Ms. Watts has conducted more than 800 seminars and workshops on small business startup processes, business expansions, and develop winning strategies and marketing to the federal government. So today we welcome her. This is my teacher, my sensei, a woman with a passion for helping her community, and she means so much to us. And not only that, I've made her an honorary Jamaican because she spends more time in Jamaica than I do every year. Welcome, Miss Paula Watts.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I love Jamaica. That's my happy place.
Well, Miss Paula, listen, we are more than ecstatic to have you here on the Rogue Asset Podcast. Okay. Invitation was extended, invitation accepted, and I thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's always about impacting and empowering. So the more I can get the message out, we're all in a better position.
Good stuff. So I'm hoping, I know, you have given myself and so many others game to go out there and do this thing. And it's not just a one-time drop-off. You continually do each and every day. So we're going to kind of get into it and get as much out to our audience today as possible. First thing we're going to ask, what inspired you to start Government Procurement Innovators, GPI, and how did your background shape your journey into this field?
Thank you for asking that question because for me, it really all starts with our history here in America. I think being black in America, we have a different, unique experience than any other culture. And what has always driven me is what I've seen the generations before me experience, specifically my father, who was one of the first black police officers in my hometown of Asheville, North Carolina. He ended up having to sue that city because based on discrimination. He won, and then he retired and ran for city council. But watching his journey and his experience was showing me a whole lot, meaning how he leveraged the system to benefit our family and our community. He was a juvenile police officer. So he wasn't taking our kids to jail. He was taking them home to mama and giving them the lecture. And he was doing the same thing with the white community. So when he retired and wanted to run for city council, that community was what was supporting him. And he was the only black city councilman on the city council at that time. And while he was there, he was able to see land by the projects and felt like the kids needed a park. So he was able to get it funded, and we now have a park in his name. So for me, we stand on tall shoulders. And after college, I went to Washington, D.C. But let me back up just a little more. What I've realized specifically lately is no one has really talked about my generation's history and how we've played in this culture of America. my generation, I'll be 65 this year and 10 years in business.
Okay, yeah.
But we were really the guinea pigs of this integration, meaning they had to force North Carolina to integrate the system. And I think when you look at what Martin Luther King did, he had a good concept. We just wanted equal. Provide us with the same school books, the same economics that you're providing the other side. But when they integrated us, they broke our community. They forced me to go to a school that did not want us and was not acceptable of us or accepting us. And we had to figure out how to navigate this system that didn't want us from the beginning. And what I saw was the same playbook that they're doing today. That's where that gentrification comes into play. Mm-hmm. But in my time, in my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation, it was urban renewal, where they came in and bought up the land and built up all these projects. At the same time, that's when the Civil Rights Act came into play, and they created the opportunities, not for the black men, but for black women. Mm-hmm. Meaning, you let me go when you need to interact. I don't know how this flows.
Nah, go ahead. I'm listening. I just had like a little minor disturbance on my phone here.
Okay. But what they did with the Civil Rights Act is they allow more black women to get into government. That's how we were able to grow and maintain our families. They introduced the welfare, which meant you couldn't have a man in the family. So for me, I saw them systematically destroy our communities. Because growing up, when we were segregated, I had all the teachers. You had a safe nest of people who supported and cared about you.
Right.
And so when they integrated us, we got in that system. I went to East Carolina, and that was in 78. And our class was the largest black class ever coming to that university. And for me, when they integrated us, we had riots in Asheville every year from the 6th to the 10th grade. And it was the black students rioting because they knew they had destroyed their football team, their history. We were beginning to get suspended more. And for me as a child, from the 6th to the 10th grade, that was kind of scary because all you would hear was glass breaking in the hallways, and the black teachers that did come with us to those schools making us hide in the classroom. So you can imagine as a child, that could be pretty traumatizing.
Right.
So when I went to East Carolina, which was on the other side of North Carolina, to that school, that's when Carter was in administration, and he gave out BEOG grants. I don't know if you remember anything about basic education grants where they gave the most money.
I'm Jamaican. I was in Jamaica at the time.
Okay. Well, they gave free grants for you to go to school. And our class at East Carolina was the largest black class that ever they brought in. And it was 2,000 of us against 18,000 white students. So in our classrooms, they want to talk about black people. And I started right then and there, raising my hand. And I think that's what began to ingrain in me. My roommate and I were the only black roommates on our floor. I stayed in the dean's office.
Oh, wow.
Because we were always getting written up where all the white little girls, they could be out in the hall drinking and doing whatever, but if we did anything like that, we were sent to the deans. We ended up burning the book. I started protesting then because the yearbook didn't have any of the black people in it.
Oh, wow. So the yearbook was segregated.
It was segregated. They accidentally destroyed all the sororities and fraternities pictures.
By accident.
By accident. So we had a book burning, but we also collectively pulled all of our votes together to nominate a black homecoming queen.
Okay.
They had 19 candidates. We chose one. And what we did, we started stuffing the ballots. We strategically positioned ourselves at the voting booth. So at the end of the day, we were stuffing those ballots before that Bush corral we were doing. So she won.
Right.
But when she won, they booed. She had to come and sit in the stands with us. Normally, she would go to the press booth.
Right.
All across campus was nigger homecoming cream, spray painted.
Oh, wow.
So for me, I think all of that was ingrained in I have to fight the power.
Right.
Because in North Carolina, that's all I saw.
Right.
And on the southern part of it, they weren't used to the fight.
Right.
So we mobilized then, and I think that began my leadership skills.
All these things is kind of what honed you to become. So tell me a little bit, like once you left college and you ended up in D.C., how was that for you?
I thought I was free. I'd never seen that many black people in my life.
Chocolate City.
Chocolate City. Whereas in Asheville, it was like 8% black people. So I was like, y'all free up here. And then my very first job was with a contractor that was a part of that 8A program that I'm always pushing, doing event planning.
Okay.
Which was a perfect job for me. It's like I get to plan a party on the government's dime. And I got to travel on those contracts, which gave me a different exposure because the people who were marketing to me were these hotels. So they would put me in the suites, and I was like, oh, this side, the other side. So I knew then at 25 I was going to start my own business. And I remember telling my father that, and he was like, go for it, baby. I got you. And so as I was planning those events, I was sitting inside those events and listening how the government operates and understanding how the money flows. And so in our community, we disconnect our taxes to these contracts.
Yeah.
And once I got in the position of being a project manager, I saw how I was getting paid. So my allegiance was no longer with the companies that was holding those contracts. My allegiance became with my government client. So my government client made sure that anytime, every 3 years, that contract had to go through to a new 8A company. They made sure that 8A company hired me. So I ended up going through 6 of them.
Okay.
And I was watching and I was studying business. And I knew I was going to start my own business. So after the 6th company, started my company, the first year in business, I received my first $1 million contract. But before I became full-time under the company, I was fired and hired on the same day.
How did that happen?
What I realize now, those 8A companies, although they were black-owned, the infrastructure was white. And I understand now they had to be the face for the company to get these contracts. So one of the companies that I went through, they weren't spending their money properly. My very first paycheck bounced. And
that's concerning.
3 years later, they never called up. They used my contract to buy bad debt. So they was always in the hole. So by the end of that contract year, everything was breaking loose. They couldn't pay the hotel deposits. They couldn't reimburse people. My name is on everything. So I kindly let the government know what was going on.
Okay.
They found out they had this white lady come in and just hired. She had just been hired, and she wanted my office. And I said, and she wanted it that day. I said, no, ma'am, I'm not going to be able to do that.
Right.
She said, fine, you're fired. So that was at 11:30. And I'd always had the mission of training our youth. So in the summers, because that's what I saw the other side. They bring their kids in, their kids learning computers at that time. So I did the same thing. I didn't have kids. I brought all these kids in. And so they got to experience me being fired. And as I was being fired, they're crying and they're taking stuff out of their office because the mistake they made, I had the power and the kids had the power. I had 5 meetings going on at one time. We were the only ones that knew.
Right.
So I'm supervising the kids, bring that stuff in as I'm packing my stuff to go on an interview that I'd scheduled at 1:30. The government already told me where the contract was going. The kids learned their lessons. They ended up sitting down and forcing that company to pay them more money because they had the knowledge.
Right.
I go on the 1:30 interview. I told them I just got terminated. They was like, okay, we'll bring you on a consultant, but when the contract starts, we're going to cut your salary by $13,000.
How did you take that?
Not well, knowing that the government had been paying me this salary and I was getting increases every time I went to a new company.
Right.
So I was at their mercy. I needed a job. So I took the cut, but I studied operations. And they depended on temporary staff. With event planning, as you know, you just need bodies.
Right.
So I found a company in the hotel that did copying and had a temporary staff. I created my company at that point, and I told them, I'm starting my company. And they was like, oh, that's so cute. So understanding that, I cut a deal with the company in the hotel. I said to them, I'll make sure you get the copying for all these events if you hire my temporary staff. He agreed. I went back to the same white women that cut my salary. I said, I found a great company. We should use them. Let's try them. They agreed. They called him. He called me. I would call my friends and family. I need y'all to take 2 days off. I'll pay you $12 an hour. I invoiced $28 an hour. I made $60,000 in 6 months.
Oh, wow.
So for me, it's understanding how America makes money.
Right.
That was the light bulb.
Right.
America makes money based on what? What do you think? What do you think? How does America make money here?
In my opinion, from human labor.
And what's your background?
What? Entertainment?
Real estate.
Business? Real estate?
It's real estate.
I was about to say, it's a lot of backgrounds, Miss Paula. Which one?
The real estate.
Yeah.
You think about it. They brought us over here to man the land. So that's the real estate.
That's why labor came to mind first.
And that was free labor.
Right.
And so you think of the system. The system is designed for everybody to be a laborer. Your degrees.
Be a worker.
I have a lot of MBAs, all these degreed people, but no one has taught them how to grow that practice.
Right.
Your MBA, they're teaching you to go work for a corporation.
Well, I'm going to tell you that is one thing in a lot of cases I've gotten in conversations with people about different HBCUs. Of course, I'm proud of my alma mater, which is Howard University. And I always point out, I feel like the difference with Howard and a lot of other HBCUs is we're groomed to be leaders. We're groomed to take chances, be entrepreneurs. And that's why I always argue with people. I said, look around. You know, nothing wrong with having pride in your HBCU, but if you look at who the leaders are and how they emerge, right, you will see where they come from. And that was my experience at Howard. I attended Howard thinking I was going to become an investment banker. They had a small business development center. I got exposed to that, and that was the first time I actually realized that I could be a business owner, right? And then you couple that with the type of people that showed up on campus. I remember one of my first experiences was meeting Earl Graves, and Earl Graves was coming in with Magic Johnson, who was at the time, I think, in if memory serves me correctly, he was taking on his first entrepreneurial endeavor as a joint venture with Mr. Graves. They were purchasing a Pepsi bottling plant in Maryland. And so I'm seeing all of that happening, and I'm like, I don't want to be an investment banker anymore. I want to be independent. I want to own my own business, you know, and that kind of planted the seed.
But you didn't get exposed being in the heart of D.C. to government contractors?
Yeah, I did, to real estate and government contracting. One of my first experiences was government contracting. I can't tell you it was enjoyable.
Okay.
I had a business partner who was my partner in an entertainment company. We did a lot of club promotions and like rap concerts, comedy shows, and stuff like that in the DMV at the time. And he had started down the government contracting road because he had a sister who was fresh out of the U.S. military, who was a disabled veteran. And, you know, he kind of put everything together, him and the sister, and they started a company. So I wasn't interested at first, but they landed their first contract, and they needed capital. So he said, hey, since we're already in business together, why don't you buy into this company? We're going to make a lot of money because this is the contract. And so I agreed. So, you know, got in with them. It was a good experience, but a bad experience at the same time. This was probably early to mid 90s. And we were doing a lot of jobs. We have millions of dollars of accounts receivables on the books, but we couldn't get the cash from the government. And so when I tell you we were having stressful paydays, and the contract was a moving contract. So I also learned, guess what? You don't have the best humans, human resources when your business is moving, right?
Yes.
And come payday, those people want to get paid.
Yes.
So, you know, thanks to my background and his background, because I was finance and he was accounting, you know, that was our academic background. We knew of factoring, which is accounts receivables financing at the time.
Yes.
And we met with a bunch of factoring companies and was able to kind of put some deals together. But those were costing us like 20% of every dollar at the time. Yes. And we were in this very vicious cycle.
Like crack. I've been
right,
down
of just hemorrhaging that 20% because we had to make payroll.
Yes.
Right? Yes. But like I said, we're moving, and we're moving military brass.
Yes.
So, you know, in that business, things happen. We're having tractor trailers that break down.
Yeah.
Okay. We've had, you know, like I also stated, we don't have the best personnel.
Yes.
So we're being soft-hearted, allowing people to take equipment home, and then we're getting calls from DC Metro like, we've impounded your van because the gentleman who said he works for you guys that had it picked up a streetwalker and essayed her, and so now your van is in impound, right? So we're dealing with all of that. But from accounting perspective, we're looking at these books and we're like, if we could just get our hands on all of this. And then for me, at that time, moving sounded simple, but I didn't realize it's a high cost business. When you really kind of had to meet the government requirements for what these containers needed to be, and even the clothing, what they needed to be packed in, like dish barrels, and those costs ran up pretty quickly. And so eventually it wore me out. I wanted to be bought out, and I left the business at the time and put all my focus in entertainment from that point on. And that's the business I was in. I don't know what happened with him and all that, but that left a bad taste in my mouth for many years as far as government contracting, where people would bring it up and I would just be like, right? Because I was just thinking, yeah, it's good, but how? I'm never going to get my money, right? So it wasn't until years later, fast forward, I think about 2015, when I met you, and you were speaking, and I'm like, okay, well, but has anything changed? You get the money now, or? And I found out a lot has changed. Apparently, there have been a lot of reforms that protect smaller companies that do allow for the payment, for you to be paid on time. And I've since had the experience. I've done some government contracts, and I think we got paid within 7 days.
Yeah, it's a small business fast pay act.
Yeah. So it wasn't a problem at all. We have done a few yellow ribbons for the government. So they pay differently now, y'all. They do pay differently now.
And that's the low hanging fruit.
Yeah, that is a low hanging fruit.
But my mission is the big fruit. We're so accustomed to chasing the crumbs. We're so accustomed to competing with each other. And right now, more than ever, we need to collectively come together and pool our resources together. It's getting ready to be a dangerous time.
Yeah, I can sense it.
But I also stand on those shoulders that I think that had a whole lot less than we've ever had. We have to deprogram ourselves and start really creating our own internal ecosystem, self-finance ourselves on these contracts, because working on the inside of SBA, I saw the numbers. They never were backing us. Our community was never getting the loans. It would be the Asians, Pacifics, the Hispanics. Our numbers were always low. But again, because of how we've been groomed in this country, we need the haves to come back and be able to finance some of these businesses. Because if you think of the civil rights era, who was financing the civil rights era? Do you know?
Herman Russell, for one, comes to mind.
Aretha Franklin.
Harry Belafonte.
Yes.
Sidney Poitier.
Yes. And you just think about it, all this money that we do have, and that was the damage of the integration, because it took the money out of the community. When we were segregated, we had no other choice but to work together. And so that's why I'm doing an own call, because the game is changing, as you know, just within these 5 days.
Very quickly.
The 8A program, for those of you who may not know what that program is about.
Yeah, tell us more. What is that program about?
That program was part of that Civil Rights Act. It was a contracting vehicle to level the playing fields for Black-owned businesses. Over the years, they diluted it and allowed other ethnic groups to become a part of that program. By being in that program, you're in it for 9 years. It is a true business development program, and it allows you to go to any federal agency and you can be awarded contracts up to $4.5 million with no competition. What's occurring now, based on the affirmative action, we had a Caucasian woman who sued SBA and said, it's not fair that I'm not able to go after these contracts in this program, and just because I'm white. She won. Mm-hmm. So last year the rules changed based on your social status, because it's based on two components, your social and your economic status. Based on your social status, previously, as long as you were a member of these ethnic groups, you met that criteria. Now the rules are that you have to write a narrative on how you've been traumatized and discriminated in being black in America. And now what they've done is increase the percentage of ownership in that program for investors. So what I see now is this is how that we play this game. I had a person who processes the application on SBA on the line last month to educate people. Previously, you could own up to 10% of an 8A company and never be on SBA's radar. And what do I mean by not being on SBA's radar? You don't have to provide any documentation. They're not looking at your income tax. As long as you're a silent partner, they don't care. Their focus is going to be on the person that they're qualifying into that program. Last month, they increased the ownership up to 20% now. Mm. So for me, we're seeing the writing on the wall. Mm-hmm. What they're doing is now they've opened the door for Caucasians to come into the program based on them showing how they've been discriminated against by blacks. Check it out. Now, whites can get into the program. They've always been able to get into the program. It was just a little harder because they had to write this social narrative. Them getting into the program, now you got these white investors that can come in and invest in those 8A companies and own them up to 20%. Now they have the capital to grow that business. Right. We have to play the same game. That's where the haves and the have-nots have to come to play. Mm-hmm. So the Tyler Perrys, the entertainers, the athletes, those that have the money and can't and do not qualify under that economic component. Mm-hmm. The economic component states as long your adjusted net worth cannot exceed $850,000 minus any equity in your home or in your business. As long as you fall under that, you meet the economic component of the program. So the vision is, and that's why I'm trying to work with even NARAB, is to bring the haves to the have-nots, because most of us who've made our wealth has been through the real estate the end of it.
Absolutely. And for those that don't know, NARAB is the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. Mm-hmm. Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Paula.
Yes. So bring those who are exceeding that economic threshold, have them invest into those 8A companies that we're training, because our program has been very successful in taking them step by step and people just following the blueprint. I took everything from that first business. It works, follow it. So have the haves invest into those 8A companies. They can own up to 20%. You're not on SBA's radar. That 8A company he invests in, do the work, win their contracts, buy that 20% back, right? And now they do the same thing with somebody else. Right. This is how we begin to create this generational wealth. As long as they have that program available, and we don't, and I'm talking to my colleagues, former colleagues there, they're not going to get rid of it.
Okay, that's good to know, because that certainly has been a concern.
Well, it's the only program that allows sole source contracts. No other program will allow you to go to any federal agency and you sell your service and they say, "Oh, I like you. Here's a
Right.
$4 million contract."
And expound on that for those that don't know what a sole source contract is, please.
It's non-competitive, meaning there are a whole pool of contracts that are part of this program that are identified as sole source. Those are contracts that you're not competing with anyone on. That's why they call them sole source, non-competitive contracts.
Got it.
And that's how people grew their wealth up in D.C. If you think about D.C.,
Oh, yeah.
that's where the greatest wealth of black ownership has always been. And so when I came here to Atlanta and when I went to Philadelphia, I realized nobody outside of that area is playing. So what you have here in Atlanta is the businesses from D.C. coming here winning contracts. No competition. And you got CDC and 5 military bases here.
Mm-hmm. This is true.
So it's us understanding the rules of engagement. And what I'm doing on my side, since they really have made me mad, I'm creating my little own underground railroad. We got a couple of Harriets and a couple of Nat Turner Juniors on the leadership.
Okay.
Is to stack up all those government employees that were on the inside in acquisitions that are retiring to come on this side. Everything that they did on the inside, we want them on this side so that when these businesses do start competing for those larger $100 million contracts, you have somebody that can evaluate it and give them a better chance of competing. My whole goal and mission now, since the game keeps changing, is to perfect and make sure people understand first, and it's always been that. I use the certifications to draw you in, but my game is that you understand how to compete first as a small business. That's how I was trained by all those black-owned businesses.
Right.
I'm a small business, but if you put the 8A on there, it's stereotype because they are stereotyping. That's for black people, and they can't read or write.
Gotcha.
So I want everyone to, they'll never know whether you black or white based on what you're presenting.
Right.
And the real estate agents and all of them, all them pictures, take off. Take those pictures off. We don't need to know your color. And you think of the real estate game, and I think of the agents, and I've been involved with that community since I've gotten here. There was a big contract that came out from HUD, and I just got the SBA. Every real estate agent in Atlanta was down there. I want to compete on this contract.
Right.
And I was like, you're not even ready. You don't even know what you're getting into. And you're more than a real estate agent. If I could just remove those titles and think of all the tasks that you do to sell that house, now that's how you're creating a business model that's going to sell those services to the government.
Right.
But that shift, and you're so embedded with, I'm a real estate agent. You're more than a real estate agent.
Well, I find that is very common in a lot of people. They identify professionally what they do with who they are. When there has to be a separation, you have to be like water. You have to flow and be adaptable to other things and be open.
But those that had, and you know them personally yourself, those that got it and was able to transfer those skills, those have been my most successful students.
They have. They have. And they've certainly, they've been an inspiration as well to many, just like yourself. So I do have another question, though, or some other questions for you. What are some of the biggest challenges small businesses face in entering the government contracting space, and how does your organization help them overcome these obstacles?
Consistently what I've seen over the last 10 years is our mindset shifting. I think I spend more time deprogramming everyone, helping them to understand I don't have to know anything about that contract to win.
Yes.
That's not my job as the CEO. And I always equate business, and business is business, regardless of what the industry is. But in this space, I equate it to sports. My daddy wanted me to play sports. I played basketball. And we want to encourage our kids to become LeBron and Stephon. And I'm saying if LeBron and Stephon is making $200 million, how much is the owner making? And does the owner need to know anything about basketball? Absolutely not. What is his role, Mr. Hall? What is his role as the owner of an NBA team?
As the owner of the NBA team is basically to hire and manage people that know that industry and that game better than he is and have the overall vision to direct.
To simplify it, it's the dream team.
It's the dream team.
I'm finding the best players to
for
take
each
me
position.
to get to the goal.
Yeah.
And so when I look at that model, it's the same thing with business. I'm creating a team that I'm selling to the government. It's labor.
Yep. Labor intensive once again. Yeah.
I don't have to know anything about that contract to win as the CEO. As the CEO, my job is to find the team with the expertise.
Well, yeah, once again, I'm gonna kind of piggyback off that a little bit since I mentioned Magic Johnson in the beginning. I think Magic is a perfect example of someone that has done that consistently as a businessman. Magic is involved in so many things and owns so many different sports teams. The man was Magic on the basketball court. He doesn't know football. He doesn't know baseball. He doesn't know, but he understood business, that he had to surround himself with a dream team, in essence, to handle his business. And so, the man's a billionaire at this point.
And LeBron is the same
And LeBron
thing.
is the same way.
Yes.
A couple years ago when I found out, LeBron bought a piece of Liverpool, the soccer team that plays in the English Premier League, which is very high value, one of the more valuable teams in the EPL. And I was like, what does Bron know about soccer, right? But he doesn't have to. His team, Rock Nation, the same thing. We can go on. There's a lot of organizations, but I know exactly what you're talking about. I've gone after quite a few nursing contracts over the last couple of years. Haven't landed any yet, but my time is coming. But what I was able to do was put together great players to go after those contracts. So I understand the concept thoroughly, especially when you're going after those larger, multi-million-dollar contracts. And that was a mindset shift because I used to look at those contracts and my partner would say, what about this one? And I would literally be frozen. Like, we can't do that because I don't know. I've never done. And then one day I was sitting in my office and something clicked. I'm like, I'm not thinking about this correctly, right? Let me reverse it and let me go back and think. Let me find what partners I can come up with, how I can put together teams to function in these areas. And to be honest with that, I cold called some people, some big, some small, and it was surprising some of the things that I was able to kind of package and come together. It's not as difficult as one may think, depending on what exactly it is that you have that you're going after. But I completely agree with you. It's a mindset thing.
And I trained, my whole vision was to bring the entertainers, the athletes, because everybody, to me, is still working on a plantation. They're not controlling anything. So I was fortunate to be able to train Malik and his family. He got it. after 30 years, you're still having to do auditions.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're really not making any money.
Yeah.
So it's having them to understand, and he got it. Take those skill sets over here, because if you're an entertainer, if you're an actor, you're a musician, you're running a business. You're still having to manage a team.
Yes, you are.
It's no different to me.
Not at all. The product changes, but still the same thing.
It's the same thing. So helping us to understand that and breaking those curses of not trusting each other. That's where we tend to falter. As soon as money come in or someone wants to take the lead, we don't trust each other. And for me, every other culture, they bring each other in. You think how their culture is.
Sometimes, sometimes I'm not even sure if it's a matter of trust sometimes. I feel sometimes like in our community, there's a little bit of a disease there where everyone wants to be the man or the woman. So once a certain thing is achieved, it's hugged up on so tightly that I want to be the only one here, and I'm not going to let anyone get close. So they become comfortable. As long as they're here and you're there, it's tolerable.
Yes.
But the minute that you start trying to rise or come close, then it becomes like whoa, no. It's like they're catching up. And I think as a people, we have to get past that because no other community does that.
Well, it goes back to how we were brought here. It's the crabs in the barrel.
Yep.
You had the house in the field. So that's where it started. So we're 2 generations back from slavery. And so the field niggers look different than the house niggers. But the field niggers didn't understand that the house niggers was just suffering just as much as the field, but if not more.
In a different way.
If not more. So that's embedded in us, and that's what we're passing on constantly. So when we were segregated, you think about it, we had no other choice.
Right. You couldn't say, oh, I'm not going to Miss Paula's father's shop because, I'm not feeling them.
Yes.
You had to go because that's, right?
Yeah.
That's whatever that business was, and you needed that service.
Correct.
So you didn't have that choice to I'm not blah, 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 blah with them because,
Well, again, they let us out, and they took the money out of the community. And those of us that got out, we never went back. We left the whole segment behind us.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at now. And we're letting others raise our children. I think the biggest mistake of the integration was the education, right? They allowed the system to educate us. And they're doing the same thing now. Okay, now we don't want this taught to the kids. But if you think of the education system, it's still segregated. All of the blacks are in the public schools, still with the less resources than those up in Alpharetta.
Yeah. Big difference, and we've been so careless with that though, because if you look at recent years, our communities have been so careless where we've literally allowed people that live elsewhere to sit on our school boards in certain places without any checks and balances. So there's definitely been a lot of reckless behavior there that we have to kind of get a hold of. So here's another thing. Have you noticed any emerging trends or changes in how government contracts are awarded, particularly for small or minority-owned businesses?
I haven't. It was good. That's why I was kicking and screaming with Biden and Harris. They were opening up doors, and the people that were working on the inside of the government were doing things I'd never seen before throughout my career. Now, it's getting ready. The landscape is definitely going going to change. We just have to adapt. Again, my focus, and when I'm trying to tell all minority small business owners, don't focus up there. That's a mental thing. And we were mentally abused for 4 years previously. I refuse to be mentally abused. That's why I cut down the news after November 9th. I just didn't want that in my spirit. But we do need some of y'all to be in there to listen to see what's going on. But I need more so on the ground, understanding this game and how we can win contracts. Even the other thing about this is the injustice they did with this prison system. Most of us, including myself, have family members that have touched this justice system. And if no one has looked at the Amendment 13th and understand that's a contract and it's still another source of free labor. And Clinton, everybody wants to say he was the black president, but he did more damage to us than any of them. Because that's where that 3 strike came up. My nephew, he in and out of that system. He can't go into the community because what's on the real estate in the rental? The first thing, are you a felon?
Right.
So they can't come back into the community. You can't get a job. I'm a felon.
Right.
But they can start a business and even get into the 8A program.
Absolutely.
They just can't be on parole or probation.
Right.
So it's helping that community to change their mindset because most of them were in the system for economics anyway.
Yep.
When I look at my nephew out there selling that crack in that time, that's what they did.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In Asheville in the 90s. Crack is in this little small southern town. How did crack get here? And so what I saw with my nephews...
I can tell you how about women.
What I saw with my nephews, we were the first generation of integration. My nephews, 1st and 2nd grade, those white teachers started labeling them. So they didn't progress no further than the 8th grade. By the 8th grade, crack come into their sentence. Like, I don't need this education. I'm making more money out on the streets. But they were selling the drugs to my generation. They weren't smoking it.
Right.
So there's 2 generations they've destroyed.
Oh, yeah.
In and out of the nephew, in and out of jail, he having babies. The jail has raised him. The streets has raised the babies. Now the baby having babies at 14, 24, a great nephew got 6 children by 3 different babies' mamas. What are we doing?
Yeah, we got to get a hold of it.
Yeah.
So let's get on a brighter note, because now you got me kind of.
Well,
it's our reality, but we gotta, we gotta keep kind of pushing and focus on the positive. So, can you share a success story from one of your clients that highlights the impact of your work?
Yes, I'm gonna give a shout out to. I have a couple on. I have Labrisha.
You have a few. Don't be modest. You can mention them. This is your moment. We want people to know the great work you do and that your plans actually work.
It was a whole. I said that when I arrived here, all the real estate agents was coming to SBA. And Stacy and Labrisha and a couple of them. I was like, oh, you don't sound like the rest of them. And Stacy at that time had just become the president of Empire Board.
Yeah, Stacy Mollison.
Yes.
Shout out.
And I remember her saying to me, if you teach me everything that you know, I promise you I'll be a success. So I had her to come back, and I had a thumb drive of all the things I had in that first business and put it on. You're going to need this. And she studied me, and she was trying to bring everybody along because she understood it too. And she mastered this. So Stacy is now, she's probably done about $75 million in government contracts. She leveraged that to get Amazon contract where she has 100 drivers. She's now in Charlotte.
Okay.
But now she's leveraging all of that revenue from both sides. Because she's a smart businesswoman.
She is.
To do development in Guyana, who struck oil over there. So she's on the ground.
She's Guyana. Yeah, she's in Guyana right now. She was talking about going to Suriname.
But what she did was had her son as 26.
Okay.
That was 3 years ago. Get him incorporated, train him up. She started subcontracting to him. She graduated from the program next year. Now he's ready to become 8A certified. She has a 23-year-old. She's trained up. She's managing the Amazon.
Yeah.
So that's how, again, we begin to create this generational
Legacy.
wealth.
Yeah, legacy and generational wealth.
With Labrisha, the same thing. What I lacked when that first business, I didn't know that SBA had a loan program where I could have bought a building. Because you hear me keep saying real estate and labor. That's how America thrives and survives. And had I known at that time, but I passed it on to Breezy, she took it. Allow those contracts to pay for your building.
Yep.
Because the government's going to reimburse you for rent and all of that.
Right.
And then with SBA, they have a commercial loan program where you only have to put 10% down on that building. So now your financing should not be as challenging.
Brilliant. And the person she's speaking of, that's Labricia Dawson. Shout out, Breezy.
Dawson Management.
Dawson Management.
And again, we had to change everybody's name.
Because it all had real estate on it.
And you're not pigeonholing yourself. I don't want anybody to be pigeonholed. So everybody's some type of management company.
Yep. All right. So that brings us, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs looking to enter government contracting or establish a foothold in a niche market?
It goes back to the mindset. And that's what part of my program does, is teach you how to be a CEO, and don't get caught up on your skill set.
Day one. Day one is really, that is, I could tell you firsthand, that is what she teaches day one in her program.
And because if you're branding yourself based on your skill set, you're always working in the business. You're never going to grow it.
She's dropping gems, y'all. So, for those that are unfamiliar with government procurement, what are some common misconceptions about the process?
It's too much paperwork. I'm not sure what they're looking for. What I found consistently with the students is we hold ourselves back. It's fear. People are scared. And to me, I'm a risk taker. Let me just jump in. And that's the way I learn. Understanding it's a process. To me, it's easier than anything, because once you understand the process and understand that they're uniform and understand that language, just as the slaves knew, if we understand how to read and write, the future will be better. And it's the same scenario to me. Understand that language, understand the acronyms, understand how you should submit it. Because once you submit one for Pacific contracts, for instance, when I was winning the $1 million contracts in event planning, I had a template. There wasn't any time I bid on another contract that I had to reinvent and start from scratch. Because the process of doing an event is the same process regardless of who it's with. Am I not correct, Mr. Entertainer, DJ?
Manager, executive producer.
Manager, executive. Sorry, I don't want, there we go with the title. I don't want to DJ a little bit lower there.
No, DJ's just on the talent side. But no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I could tell, even from my experiences, that in each category that we've ever bidded on, we managed to develop templates. Mm-hmm. And that template, if we're going for a nursing contract, is certainly not the same template that we're putting in for an event, management. They're all distinctly different.
Correct.
If we're going for, a landscaping contract, that's a completely different. So it's all templates. And what she says is absolutely the truth. I think with GovCon, you have to kind of learn the terminology, learn to speak. But sometimes I think when you're coming in, you look at it like it's such a giant thing to do. But truthfully, in any business, even church, there is a speak to it and a certain culture that you have to pick up on in order to speak their language, in order to do it. So it's no different. But I think mentally, as individuals getting in, it's a mindset of, sometimes I believe we set a degree of difficulty ourselves. Like it's just this huge foreign thing, and we become resistant, versus if you kind of program yourself to it, learn the culture, the process, and the processes to get through the situation, I think it becomes a lot easier as you go.
But I think the number one thing that I get from people, just of their interest, they just want to get to the contracts.
Yeah.
I just want to, how can I win a contract? And for me, that's the least where you should start.
Yeah.
Because once you get the contract, you're not going to know what you're going to do with it. So for me, with our program, I'm making sure you understand the business side. Yeah. Build a foundation that's going to support the contracts. Mm-hmm. But once the foundation is built, you're not going to have to go back and understand what you're building. And I think that was my biggest lesson learned in that first business. Yeah. I went from a project manager to running a multi-million-dollar company. I had no clue of operations. I couldn't read a profit and loss statement. Only thing I was concerned about, as you were saying, payroll. Yeah. I also learned with the business, like you're moving, certain industry, I tried to tend to have people think about it differently. When you're looking at transportation, when you're looking even at construction, those industries have high liabilities.
They do.
So, and the cash flow. With construction, there's still a good old boy network. We can't get in because we don't have the bonding capacity. What I saw with the companies that I worked for, and even myself, I started out event planning. Event planning was hellacious on cash flow, meaning if the government called and they said I had to travel 200 people, I had to come up with the money to travel 200 people before I got paid. Mm-hmm. So you were correct with the factoring company. I started depending on the factoring company. Mm-hmm. I gave $90,000 of profit to a factoring company that ate into everything. So what I did as I grew and I started looking at the other companies that were successful, I changed and started looking at labor-based contracts. Those are the easiest contracts. Yeah. The only thing I have to worry about is paying payroll. I don't have to worry about putting no hotel deposit down. You look at transportation, you have no control over that. That truck down, right? Yep. You losing money. You don't have no control over gas. The insurance is high. Yep. Yeah. So to me, I'm making money off of labor anyway, and the government's going to reimburse me. I'm going to get my salary covered. I get fringe benefits that the government's going to reimburse me for, and I get a profit off it anywhere from based on the type of contract and the size of the contract. The multi-million-dollar contracts generally 7.5% to 10% profit that I'm going to take home. After my salary covered, everybody's salary. what I tell the small businesses, as you've been doing, I'm glad that you have been executing, is going after the low-hanging fruit, those run and done.
Yep.
The projects that are 250,000 and below. Those are specifically for small business without any certification.
Yep.
Because what you're doing on those low buys is building a relationship.
And that we have. Those you have some of them call for, high cash outlays, hotel contracts where you have to book like 100 rooms for FEMA for a certain duration of time. So in those, you're able to kind of cultivate hotel relationships and relationships within the agency and stuff like that. But you have to put all the money up front.
But on my very first contract, I was able to negotiate with the government to pay me every 2 weeks so that they know as small business, that's a lot to carry that money. So you can negotiate with the government. And that's why they are more sensitive to small businesses. Yeah. Typically, the payments is 2 weeks. If it past 30 days, they have to pay you interest. Yeah. But that's based on a correct invoice. Where our challenge comes, we don't have the infrastructure. Why do you think we lost on much of the money that was being issued with those loans during COVID? Because we don't have our tax returns, we don't have our profit and loss statements. We're doing cash on the side. We got to stop.
Yeah.
We got to get the business side in order.
We have to get it nailed down. So, as a woman and a leader in this space, have you faced unique challenges? And if so, how have you navigated them?
I think as being a woman and a black female and a black woman, I think based on my background, I was so focused on racism. I wasn't focused on the sexism. That is still so heavy in our community. So I think as a female and being a leader, and I'll give an example. I was married, and I just remember before we got married, I just started the business, and I knew that I was going to be a successful business owner. And I'm telling him, are you going to have any problems once this business start growing? It's like, oh, no, baby, I'm going to be in the background cheerleading. But once the business started growing, now it shifted because now he wants to be in the one that's telling people that I'm coming home and telling him about business issues, and he's telling me how to handle my business. Yeah, whatever. If you want to believe that, honey. And I think black men and black women have two different challenges. But we need to come together and we need each other. We can't survive without each other. I think black men are number one target in America.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Black women, we've carried the load. And I don't feel like the black men have taken the leadership that they should. I just think that they're quiet now. After Martin Luther King died, we don't hear from the black men. If you look at the civil rights and all you saw was black men, and I'm not quite sure.
Unfortunately, I think what has happened, and I am definitely thankful for the black women that stood in the gap, that raised these children on their own. But unfortunately, in a lot of cases, they didn't raise men. And so you have a lot of men or boys that are of the age of men, but aren't men. And so they go on to have girlfriends or wives that continue that nurturing instead of pushing them out and putting them up front and making them realize what they're really supposed to do and be. Instead, they're pampered. And what their mom did, this girlfriend or wife continues to do. And so as long as that continues, you're going to be in the same position. It's me, and I have 3 brothers, one who is, since gone on to be with God. But my mom raised 3 warriors, with a dad. I had a stepdad. They're my brothers, but they raise stand-up men, right? And there is a difference. And I know this difference because, as brothers, we have friends. And, we have had friends that we have had to kind of push and pull along, right? To kind of stand where we stand as men. So I think that is what has happened. And it's not just in America. It has happened throughout the diaspora that has kind of created this type of weakness. We have to stand up and be men in a lot of different ways. One of those first things that you have to do, you have to kind of realize that impregnating several women does not make you any more of a man than another man over there that has only one child or no children. I once had somebody laugh at me because he said, "How many children you have?" I said, 2. He said, "Only 2?" He said, "How many women?" I said, 1. He said, "What? Only 1?" Like that was a badge of honor. I said, "Brother," I said, "what you have to realize, the more children you have with multiple women," and I said, "I live in America," that financially subjugates you anyway, and you lose. I say, even if you look at multi-million-dollar athletes that are no longer in their sport, they're crying. Why? Because they have these expenses that they can no longer meet that has weakened them financially. But not just that, you're doing your society and your community a disservice because you have children that you have not prepared to go into this world in any kind of way. You have not, even if you pay child support isn't the most valuable thing I got from my parents wasn't money. It was the time, the education, the lessons, the ability to solve problems, okay? Those were the gifts, right? And we prioritized, and it was different times. I was an athlete in high school, right? My parents never saw me play a game in their life. I was an athlete. But in my culture, that's not emphasized as being important. Because the reason why they weren't there, we were immigrants and my parents were working 3-4 jobs, right? So that was more important. And when they did make time, when they weren't working, we spent quality time, which my dad imparted lessons that I still use to this day. And the way that was done is even if it was as simple as us watching a movie, the lessons that were pulled out of that movie, like one of my favorite things that I've ever watched with my dad and my uncle was The Godfather. I was taught so many things about life, responsibility, honor through that movie by watching with them. It was a master class. But other than that, they were at work. So you learn values from your parents, and that's going to be way more important than money.
And women cannot raise men to be men.
You cannot. You cannot. No matter what you do, you cannot.
But I also understand the dynamics of women and mothers. It goes back to the slaves. They raise us differently.
Yeah.
So what I see is the same spirit the slaves have today. They're fearful of sending their child or their son out there to drive or their husband. You have that same kind of fear. Are they going to come back? What happens if the police stops them? So you still carrying those same fears that slave mother had for not knowing if that child was going to be sold. So I just think that the trauma that we've done, that's been done to us,
We still carry.
we still carry it, but we also have to understand we're the most resilient community, despite. That's why what they're doing at the top, it does not really concern me. It's not having any anxiety, because if anything, I know my parents had a whole lot less, and thank God they provided the avenue where I can be in a position to do what I'm doing. They didn't have this luxury of sitting on Mr. Hall Rogue Asset
Podcast.
and speaking my truth.
Right, exactly.
So when you look at that, what they're doing now, just keep your head at the ground. Understand that we've got to come together. If nothing else from this podcast, I want people to understand we're better collectively. And if you think what Martin Luther King did with the Civil Rights Act movement, they didn't create that act because they liked us. It was economics.
It was economics.
They stopped for a whole year not doing the transportation,
Right.
carpooling, sacrificing. And for me, we have to do the same thing.
Yep.
It's like we are gluttony for punishment. And for us to understand that these dollars that they making all these decisions on, they're our tax dollars. And it's like we are helping our masses keep it going by going to Walmart. All these that getting rid of the DEI don't want to. Okay, we're cool. We don't have to be a part of it, but we don't have to keep you going. We don't have to keep funding your racism against us.
Right.
That's what I'm feeling at this moment.
Okay. So we're almost at the wire. We're going to start winding it down. So here's my last question. What legacy do you hope to leave through your work at GPI, and what's next for Government Procurement Innovators?
Thank you. That's a wonderful question to end on. I have no children, but I do have children. Every business that's come through our program in the last 10 years has been my legacy. The ones that have taken it and ran with it, that really becomes my legacy, because I know they're set, their children set, and their children's children are now on the pathway to change the dynamic of that one family. So the more that I can get, one family at a time, I'm helping to change the dynamic of that community. So the second part of it was, what am I?
The question?
Yes.
The first part was what was your legacy? And then the second part was what's next for the organization?
What's next? I'm mad.
We got that part. Well, we know you're mad. What you gonna do about being mad, Miss Paula?
I am stacking up. The vision and the goal is we're going to create our own new government. All of the old heads that are retiring are now going to become part of the GPI Procurement Academy. I'm building our own school. I'm building all of those with the knowledge to come and train you guys. So I have a whole host of elective classes that I'm rolling out in the next 2 months that we can continue the training. And us understanding we create our own workforce. and hire these individuals that we've been trained well, we've educated, we've got skill set. Now let's bring it home and pay ourselves and build our own community. I'm sorry. That's the way I see it, because they not for us. That's something I can.
They're not for us. They're not for us.
It's not like they not like me.
Yeah. But you just reinvented your whole thing. We can go for that. We go with that. We don't have to go with Kendrick's version.
Okay,
we got Miss Paula's version. They're not for us.
That's right. They've shown us.
So we're gonna have to jack that beat and kind of get this one going. Well, hey, I think every day as we kind of get deeper into this thing, I think it's loud and clear, that they're not for us. I don't even know if we'll have civil rights next week.
But if you think about it, unfortunately, we've had to take the lead. But I was most hopeful that's the first time I saw the black men engaged in this election. We were hearing your voice. I was so happy when I saw D.L. Hughley pull. Oh, that just warmed me, because your voice has been silent. You all have the same needs that the others. You want to provide for your family and protect us as women. I like to put...
Well, let me just also say that, we're not silent. I heard from what my Bison brother, the mayor of Newark, Raz Baraka, had to say. And Raz has always been passionate about his community, his people. And he has come forth this week to point out the injustices that's going on in Newark with ICE rounding up illegal immigrants, but detaining U.S. citizens at the same time. So he's requested to go see the governor and address that situation. So I'm sure we're going to be hearing a lot more from that brother, Raz Baraka, believe me.
And when you think of immigrants, most people, when they're thinking of immigrants, right, they're thinking of the Latinos, the Mexicans.
Yeah.
But look at the Jamaicans. Look at the other other communities, especially that look like us. Do you all have that sense of fear of the community of ICE coming in there?
I think I've heard it echoed, not really that loudly, in the Jamaican community, but of course, the Jamaican community is being vigilant of that. But I think Jamaicans that are in the United States illegally have always operated with a completely different mindset that is a lot more fearless. In that, I think they've always lived with the possibility that could happen, and so they've never really lived with that degree of comfort. So nothing really changes in that sense. For a lot of Jamaicans, to be honest with you, so.
Well, they're getting ready to find out, because the labor force, if they, which is crazy, if they deport all the labor help, who's going to build? It's going to affect them. It's going to cost.
Well, already the farms are complaining. The farms are complaining that no one has shown up for work. They're scared they're about to lose the orange crops and all types of other crops. So it's an issue.
It's getting ready to be a domino effect.
All right, Miss Paula. Well, thanks for coming. We're gonna wrap this up. I'm glad that we got the opportunity to do this. All right, and we will continue. I'll continue to receive your education, and I have to go get my 100 million on the path that GPI has set me on.
That's right. Stop playing. We can't play no more, y'all. This time, we have to be real.
All right.